everybody. Thank you for joining and coming to see our newest YouTube video. Epic Assist is starting up a YouTube channel where we interview and we talk with all of our different partners, and it's kind of a behind the scenes so that you can learn a bit more about the process we go through when we're trying to deliver services, and just get to know the people behind it. So as I said, this is our third one, and it's actually the first one where we're getting to do this kind of back and forth and really have someone there we can interview. And it's something that Federica had chosen to do, who's our social media coordinator. Could you give us a wave, Federica? Could you come on? A wee wave. There she is. There's a wave. So she's the genius behind all of this. Thank you so much. And just really excited to have Molly with us today. So I won't introduce Molly. I'll let Molly introduce herself. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Candace. I'm excited to be here. So I am directing one of Epic Assist's partner organizations called the Yoga Mandala Project. And I have been working in the humanitarian aid sector since 2016. And I spent time in Greece initially helping the rubber dinghies arrive with the refugees coming over from Turkey. And then while I was there, the border closed. So it was a really big crisis moment, and it was really kind of a pivotal experience for me. So I shifted from a 2-month humanitarian trip to now going on 7 years. So we spent quite a bit of time starting projects in Greece and then also over in Jordan and Iraq and Turkey. So that's a little bit about just a brief introduction to my humanitarian experience. And then aside from that, I'm also a yoga teacher and a social worker. So just gives you a quick glimpse into me.
Yeah, so we actually, which is nice to say, we met while we were over in Greece. So you were over there and you'd started up a refugee centre and you'd worked with some other orgs and you had a big team. And I think it was 2019, I came over and volunteered, and that's when we met. So
yeah, so when I was directing a different organization called Lifting Hands International, Candace came over as our volunteer coordinator. So that's when we first started working together with the Yazidi demographic. And at that time, we were running a community center for a camp in northern Greece, in a little town called Saris, where we hosted things like a women's space, a children's friendly space, educational center, a distribution point, and a community garden. So that's kind of how me and Candace's collaboration initially formed, was through that community center and through the refugee work.
It was a really great time in the space that you'd created. I obviously had come to it a few years after you had been sort of building it as you went, and it was just such a lovely environment that you'd created. Really surprisingly, even for me, a very healing place. I feel like communities coming together, volunteers and the community that we were serving, and just spending time and sharing stories and supporting each other. It was just a really lovely space to be in. And I think that that's something that I would say is a lot of your doing. I don't know if you would want to, I don't know if you're too modest to say that yourself, but I believe that.
Well, I mean, I will say that I was obviously there on the ground, also with my husband, who was kind of one of the co-founders of the program. But we did have over 100 volunteers throughout the years that co-created the space together, with everyone bringing in their unique skill sets. And one of our passions is really co-creating with the refugees themselves. So I actually give them some of that credit for creating that safe and welcoming environment for their community, and also for the international aid community to go over and visit.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think we'll talk about that quite a bit today, because I think that's both of our passion, to make sure that when we're working with communities that it's community-led and decolonial, and we're not just sort of ticking a box to say that, we spoke to the community, we've held some sort of brief consultation. We're actually wanting to really co-design and co-collaborate with communities. So just before we go on though, could you give us a wee bit more information on the Yazidi people, just for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first heard the word Yazidi, it was 2015, and I was like, what is that? And in that year, the ISIS, who many of us are familiar with, Daesh, went into the Yazidi homeland in northern Iraq and committed a genocide. So they are survivors of this genocide and survivors of many years of persecution and genocides and violence in Iraq. And they're just a really small ethnic minority there in northern Iraq that live in the mountains, and also in other parts of Iraq and Syria and Turkey and all over the world, of course. But that's kind of their homeland and their religious sacred land. their culture is very much in the agricultural world. So lots of gardening and lots of living with the land and the rhythms of nature. And so it's just been a really beautiful community for me to get involved with in Greece. And then that has bridged into other projects in Iraq and other places. So really, really great group of humans that have experienced a lot of atrocities, and they could use a lot of support, even though many of us around the world aren't even familiar with who they are.
Definitely. And I think that we both really think a lot of Nadia Murad.
Yeah.
Someone that we're both really, we've read her book, and we really, like, she's really championing the community, and she does a lot of work to raise awareness of it. And I know an organisation that works with her quite closely, and I think is it Amal Clooney, she's a human rights lawyer who's done a lot for them, and they've really, really taken it. And I think one of the court cases that they've done was trying to make sexual violence a war crime and trying to get that set as a precedent. And just all of the work they've done over the last few years, I'm still surprised that people don't always know when I say Yazidi who they are, because there's amazing community members really championing, really making sure, or trying to make sure, that the community is recognised, that what they've gone through is recognised, and that they get help for sort of where they are right now in the situation that they're in. So it's very much important for us to want to raise awareness of that as well.
Yeah, it's a group of people that definitely need help, that I think there's just not enough awareness on to bring that in. Though there's a lot of people, like Nadia Murad's a big leader, and there's also dozens of other Yazidis doing incredible work, bringing awareness and doing advocacy work, and yeah, a big need.
So one of the things I wanted to do now is sort of shift away from that,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we'll return to it, because I think it was just that experience was what really made us passionate about wanting to continue working together. But tell us a wee bit more, if you don't mind, about Yoga Mandala. That would be nice to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of jumped in real briefly with my introduction there. So the Yoga Mandala Project started back in 2015. Our founding directors were in Amman, Jordan, and they were volunteering as yoga teachers and yoga therapists and facilitation circles. And it was just a short-term trip, but they really got really great feedback from the participants. So these were refugees from Syria and Iraq and parts of Africa. And they just shared that they were really wanting the yoga programs to continue. They were experiencing better sleep, less pain in their bodies, a sense of connection with the other participants. And at that point, we thought, okay, how can we bring in more, or our founding team thought, how can we bring in more yoga teachers and create a more stable program for refugees in this place in Amman, but also all over the world. And that's when we created the trauma-informed trainings to offer in places like Amman, where there's a large refugee demographic, and yoga teachers, and not just yoga teachers, also other aid workers, language teachers, fitness teachers, counselors, therapists, come and take our training in exchange for teaching or sharing a certain number of offerings with the refugees. So that training went on in Amman for 4 years before COVID, and then that kind of went on hold with the pandemic reality. And at that point, we shifted a lot of our offerings online. So we had done that in Amman. I hosted YMP actually in Saris. They came and hosted a trauma-informed training there. So that was kind of my first initiation with them. And through my experiences being in the humanitarian aid sector, the really grassroots sector that is lacking resources, lacking staff, just, so the working environment is really difficult, and there's a lot of stress and vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue and burnout. And so through those experiences, I also became really passionate about supporting the carers. So supporting the people that are going in and working with the refugees. So when we shifted our programs online during the pandemic, we continued our trauma-informed training. We have yoga and dance programs virtually with community centers in Hong Kong and England and Jordan and Greece as well throughout the pandemic. And we've also started adding well-being programs for aid workers. So we do things like seasonal embodied self-care. So we offer different tools from the big umbrella of yoga and mindfulness. So things like tapping, EFT, things like TRE, trauma release exercises. We incorporate the breath, creative expression. So bringing in these different healing modalities that might be better received by both the refugee community and the aid workers. So that's kind of our passion, is to bring these kind of more holistic, embodied modalities to both communities.
You know that sometimes I'm not being like people are still trying to convert me to yoga, and I'm actually getting a bit more into it, because for me a lot of it's been about being self-conscious. I've never felt fit enough to start getting fit, which sounds really odd. So I'm more and more trying things, and I do really believe in it. I can see that it would be an amazing thing for refugees, particularly because once you know how to do it, it's this kind of easy thing to maintain. And even if you don't have a yoga mat, it's the only thing that really I suppose you need to have. But even if you don't have, as long as it's a surface that's like soft, you're not going to hurt yourself. Like so many other types of sort of fitness or well-being stuff requires having to pay expensive gym fees, or people are really nowadays on Instagram and all these different things and following loads of fad diets and like I don't know. I watched this exercise sort of routine the other day where someone was up, down, hopping around the side, but I thought, you're not even really moving. It looks like a dance. Like I can't imagine that's doing anything. But yeah, so I feel like just interested to hear a bit more about like why it's specifically good for refugee communities.
Yeah, well, I think you're raising something really great. And for me, it's a good reminder because I've been in the yoga world since I was a teenager. So almost 20 years. And for me to share, I guess, a little bit more about my personal journey, I have experienced my own traumas and stress. And through those experiences and eating disorder as well, it was really yoga. And I will talk more about what yoga really is that carried me through those. And when I lost my closest friend to the violence in the Middle East, it was yoga and the big umbrella of yoga and all that encompasses that enabled me to heal. And healing is a journey, so it's not that I healed, healing, and enabled me to be able to go into the humanitarian aid sector and work with refugees. So I want to start with the fact that yoga isn't gymnastics. So a lot of times when I raise yoga, especially with aid workers who aren't familiar with yoga, they say, "Oh, I'm not flexible enough for yoga." But yoga really has nothing to do with flexibility. Yoga also doesn't have to be physical. You don't need a yoga mat. You don't need a body that can move all four limbs. A lot of people coming to our programs have combat wounds or other injuries. So even people can sit in a chair. It's really about, and the reason we're passionate about bringing it to refugees, a few reasons. The first one is because, like you're mentioning, it doesn't rely on any external factors. So it's a self-regulation tool and a resource that's inside that doesn't rely on anything outside. So refugees oftentimes don't have accessibility to things that are like part of our trend of self-care. So a bathtub or getting a massage or, kind of what our capitalist culture has framed as self-care. So we're kind of trying to provide tools for refugees where they can regulate. It's not about detaching from the experiences they're in, but it's about empowering them with the coping skills to be in the experiences they're in. So things like we can talk about the breath, for example. So the breath is a really, really foundational part of yoga. It doesn't rely on anything else. So it's about empowering them with these little tools, grounding, orienting, centering, little tools that can be taken out of the space that we're in and carried into their daily lives. I hope I encompassed that well.
You're just making me feel really guilty. Like there's no excuse.
I could talk about it for an hour.
No excuses. Get it done. Get doing yoga. No, I think you're 100% right. And I like this thing of empowerment because it is really empowering to be able to do something for yourself. And even within your family setting, if you're a parent who wants to start teaching your children how to do something like yoga, I like that it's self sort of progressing in a sense. It sounds like obviously Yoga Mandala have this exchange where they teach people and those people teach people and there's this nice chain, but actually once someone has the skills they really can just do what they need to do to empower themselves and work on themselves. And I really like that. I do love that part of it.
Yeah, and when we were in Sarah's, actually, where Candace and I met at the refugee center, we were doing yoga for years with the same group of all ages, all genders, but we had a really core group of young women. And so we brought in one of our partner organizations, the Empowerment Project, that offered a teacher training with the refugees that had been practicing with us. And then we continued mentoring, and then they're able to share that within their communities in Greece. And they continued, actually, some of them, when they get transferred to Germany, continue sharing with their families or the kids in their families. And so it really becomes this tool of both self-care and community care that they can really take away.
And again, just it doesn't require a certain even location.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who sort of is going through a transition, or sort of maybe you're in a camp, or you're in a situation where you might have to move again, it's something that you can carry. So I really like that. So before we move on, because I'd like to talk a little bit next about the project we're going to do together,
Yeah.
and sort of our partnership, but I suppose just your specific role, like it'd be nice for anyone who doesn't know, like your day-to-day of what that would include.
Yeah, so we're a very grassroots project, so we're volunteer driven. So all of our efforts are done by volunteers, amazing volunteers all over the world. And I kind of just am holding the reins. So when I left Saris, it was time for a little bit of break from being in the sector, in the humanitarian aid sector, but I was still wanting to support in some way. So I'm able to work from home. I live in Arizona now, and I'm able to support remotely. So I spend a few days a week on talking with different partner organizations, creating opportunities for volunteers and yoga teachers to support refugees from their own homes. So we have, volunteers in Europe and Africa and Asia, not in South America yet, but hopefully that will come. Yeah, so my day to day is a lot of the kind of behind the scene, kind of nitty gritty, writing things out or sending emails, answering calls, creating opportunities, and holding our volunteers together. So we have volunteer coordinators, we have directors of programming and things who are all volunteer based. Yeah, so I don't necessarily get to teach yoga and things like I used to. I play more of an admin type role, but I do look forward to being in the field together with Epic Assist this summer and getting back to some of our in-person programming.
Definitely, and I feel the same way. Like I think that you sort of almost work yourself up to a point where you're
Yeah.
not doing your job anymore. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like a progression, because you're at a stage where you feel like you can advise and take things forward. But I don't think, until you said that I never really thought about what I was doing. I
Yeah.
am getting to a point where I'm not going to be doing, I don't know, we're both the same, but then maybe that's because maybe we've got that experience over time, and we're able now to be in that sort of role, making decisions because sort of from experience that it's the right thing.
Yeah, that's actually, talking about that, it actually highlights, one of the main reasons we were offering these kind of staff well-being and volunteer support programs, because there is such a high turnover rate in this field, that there's not a lot of people that carry lots of experience. So I think it's really important to care for the carers in these environments, so that there are more people like you and I that have, can play these more leadership roles, because so many people aren't able to cope with the working pressure and the just the stress that is involved.
Yeah, so what we'll do is I'll maybe I could introduce the project that we have together and that we're hoping to do this summer, and a little bit about my research, and we'll go through the document. Actually, I'll pull it up and we can go through it, take a look. But it'd be great to hear more about the Caring for the Carers, which is the free workshop that we're going to offer alongside the project for the staff of whichever centre that we visit, because it's a great thing, and and then also training for the trainers we're hoping to do. So it would be good just to get a bit more on it. So yeah, so the project that we got together and discussed during lockdown, I think it was a good year or so ago, was this project on combining, I suppose, our two strengths, or the two ways in which we deliver services. For me, I'm very much, so in my other roles, I'm like an academic. I'm very much about workshopping and sort of more verbal sort of discussion communication type stuff. And then although that is something that you do also, you're very into sort of embodied practices, and I feel as if we complement each other in that way, which is nice. I feel like sometimes the stuff I do really needs that extra sort of embodied experience, just getting up on your feet, or even, as you say, sitting and learning to breathe and just making it more about your body than just your mind, in a sense. So it's a really nice compliment.
Yeah, the embodiment is a really big piece of trauma recovery. So I think as a culture and medical society, we're learning more and more about the physical manifestations of trauma, and that trauma lives in our body physically. In order for that to be released, we have to come into our bodies through various embodiment modalities. So that's not just yoga, it can be whatever suits you. It might be dance or fitness or art. So there's so many different embodied modalities. But so that's where we really come in to bring things. And it also helps to really integrate the theory and the discussions that we do share in our programs, and similar to you, Candace. So that's kind of our goal of weaving together the theory and the embodiment with this demographic.
Definitely. So the Epic International Youth Project was initially something that I had started, I've spoke about it before on this channel, during lockdown, in order to really sort of try to bring young people an understanding or an experience from other places, because I felt like I was working with a lot of young people in Scotland who were stuck at home, unable to get out. And as much as I find all these different topics to be important, there's nothing like just hearing about someone else and their culture. And when I was off studying in different places all across the world, I studied in California, I was down in England, and I was over in Greece. It was actually more so just the discussion or getting to meet people from other cultures that to me felt like learning, felt like I was really learning and understanding things. So I wanted to bring that to a project that was also a bit like a sociology course, like first year sociology for a much younger age, talking about a mix of personal development topics and social awareness things. And really what happened as well was we had a consultation with one of our partners in Scotland, and it was a group of young people, and we spoke to them. And even though obviously we knew as adults and as practitioners that mental health would be a great thing for them, or physical health, or some topics like that, they actually was more interested in social issues. They wanted to hear about homelessness in Scotland, and they wanted to talk about race and racism, and they didn't want to just focus on their own well-being. They wanted to be sort of community members that cared and had sort of an understanding. So the project I'd initially started was a sort of mix of all those things. But then when we partnered, we've now adapted, and we've sort of, in some ways, we've narrowed it down to more specific. So initially I had 10 different topics, now we've got 6. But we've also sort of added in sort of the embodied practice that you just mentioned and some other aspects like that. And we're hoping to offer this to both refugee communities in Scotland and Germany and Greece, and also probably as well, I'd really like to take it to Gypsy traveller communities, because there's a lot of crossover, I feel, in the experiences, and I think that it would be really beneficial to them. So yeah, this is our project overview document. It tells a little bit about sort of what we've just mentioned, a bit about Epic Assist. I'll not go into that because I think everybody here knows quite a bit about that. I don't shut up about it in these videos. And then, yeah, a bit about Yoga Mandala and how we got started working together, and yeah, our teams. Then we've got like the project structure that it'd be really nice to go through. So the idea is that it'll be interactive and immersive education as well as embodied experiences. And we're looking to adapt it and change it around what the types of things that a community needs or wants. So one of the ways we'll do this is that I'm hoping to combine my PhD research with this project, or as a precursor to this project, where I would go and hold a consultancy or a series of consultancy workshops with the community prior to delivering, to make sure that we are able to understand their value systems and implement them into the project, what's important to them, aspects of their culture. So through that experience and through working also with partnership organisations and the host organisations, we'll be able to determine things like if it should really only be a female-only session that we do in that workshop, if it's better to work with age ranges sort of 11 to 13, 14, or 14 to 16, and also specifically what classes they'd like to have, because we've got a selection, and we're, in a sense they're also standalone topics, so some of them Some might want to just do 2 or 3, or some centres might want to do more of them. So yeah, just a look at our workshop list. So we've got the mental health and well-being, and in that we'll talk about the sort of conditions and symptoms associated with mental health and well-being, and sort of helping to break mental health support stigma, because a lot of communities, I think you'd said it before, they maybe favour a holistic approach, and there might be stigmas within the community that makes them not want to seek out or go down the route of traditional mental health services. And we just want to promote well-being. So the idea is that we would weave embodied practices throughout all of these sessions, and each session will have a workbook that people can take away. It'll be part discussion and part activity based, and then also there'll be some collateral and little kits. So for the mental health one, because we'll be doing a lot of sort of meditation and mindfulness, we were thinking of like a sensory kit that we could get them to make themselves. We have like nice little pouches, and they can pick a little crystal for touch and essential oils for smell. And also within the workbook there's a mood journal, so they can track their mood and things like that. But obviously we'll have, what do you envision, Molly, as being sort of the types of things that you would weave through each one, like the practices?
Yeah, so I think what we're envisioning is that these sessions will carry on as Candace has developed them, but we'll weave in embodied practices such as an opening and a closing. So really bringing people into a place where they can connect with their breath or their bodies through yoga practices, through art, through these different kind of modalities.
So yeah, after that we would have the physical health and hygiene practices session, and that would be all around the sort of different aspects of physical health. So you're talking fitness, nutrition, things like hygiene, and also we were talking maybe something to do with sleep hygiene might come into it. So Molly, what do you think that would look like?
Yeah, so the intention, I guess, to zoom out a little bit with each of the sessions is to really adapt it to the refugee population and within each community center to the challenges that they're experiencing. So physical health, we might come in and think nutrition and exercise, but if we were to ask people in experiencing displacement, their response might be different. And through my experiences working in these communities, I know that many refugees experience insomnia and really quite severe, and I would even say debilitating sleep disorders and challenges. And so maybe bringing in sleep hygiene and just creating a space where we can discuss together about what challenges we're having and what works for each other, and kind of have that shared learning space. So for the physical health and hygiene session, we also really want to provide some materials that will be supportive for the participants. So we've partnered with a really great grassroots project called Pads for Refugees. And it's actually started by one of our fellow volunteers who went to the same center where Candace and I volunteered with LHI in northern Greece. So it's a lot of us coming back to kind of see what gaps there were and see how we can fill them. And so when she was in Greece, she saw that there was a need for supporting women with basic hygiene, and that need wasn't being met. And so she's actually dedicated herself to starting an NGO that specifically provides pads for refugee women all over the world. So they've been providing them in Turkey and Syria since the earthquake, and in Lebanon and all sorts of places. And so there'll be, the pads with Pads for Refugees, and then also we're hoping to do things like toothbrushes and other things to support hygiene.
Yeah, and one of the things that I had thought would be a nice touch would be to do almost like a humanitarian exchange. So I work quite a bit with young people in Scottish youth centres, and I thought it might be nice for them to prepare like hygiene kits that we would then take over and donate, and they could put little messages and stuff on them, but then have the Yazidi also make hygiene kits, and they can put like a little message, and that could either go back to those young people, or we could partner up with a local charity for people experiencing homelessness, and just have it be that there's, rather than the feeling that they're sort of being given something without it's just nice to have that exchange where it's people from different parts of the world supporting one another. So
Yeah, I think it's a really dignified way to share aid rather than just giving people handouts, kind of giving them a sense of ownership and an exchange with it.
yeah. So and then one of the sessions we were going to look at was body image and self-esteem. So I'll say what that session means for me. And I think one of the things that we designed in our other workshop was explaining that body standards are sort of based on cultural pressures, and that young people, a lot of times young women, but young men as well, are seeing things like Instagram and all these different influencers, and there's all these filters. And basically we wanted to do something where we're thinking about diversity and also body positivity, and celebrating and learning to sort of have good self-esteem or healthy self-esteem with regards to our bodies regardless, and seeing ourselves as more than just our image. So I had designed like discussion around that I've delivered a few times, and it's gone really well, especially for me, the diversity element to it. And just one of the things that we look at is at how beauty standards have evolved over the ages. So we do a bit of a history timeline where we go through all the different, sometimes extreme, sometimes just completely makes no sense, doesn't look good, like, and actually you have a bit of a laugh at it. And what it shows us is how contradictory it all is. In the sort of 80s, 90s, it was all about the sunbeds, where you go back 100 years and there were women who were taking arsenic in order to bleach their skin white. And then we also have women and different women and men in different parts of the world who are again using skin bleaching products. And it's just very nonsensical in a sense, and it's not the way that we should think about ourselves. And yeah, just talking about that really.
Yeah, this session is particularly a passion of mine because, when I first went into working in refugee camps, I think I went in with this mindset that people would be in need of survival and mental health and things, but I didn't really consider that they're also just humans experiencing the same human challenges we are in other parts of the world. And a lot of youth are experiencing body image disorders, eating disorders, disordered eating, self-esteem, which leads to self-harm in other ways, self-esteem challenges. And yeah, so I made an assumption that this wasn't going to be a prevalent challenge within the refugee demographic. And by opening the Arts and Recreation Center and sharing yoga and fitness in different communities, I really developed a relationship with refugee, both youth and adults, where these types of topics came up, whether it's food or body images or how we feel about ourselves. And I saw a lot of self-harm, a lot of disordered eating, a lot of eating disorders actually, over-exercising, the whole spectrum. And so I feel like this is something that's not really being addressed within the refugee community. And so I really am excited to be able to empower refugee youth with awareness and just conversations around it. And hopefully that will have some ripple effects for themselves and for their communities.
Definitely. A couple of things I thought about there. So just to say that we're also going to be designing this session even further with specialists and consultants to make sure that we're really getting it right, and we're making sure that we're talking about it in the correct context, because obviously it's a very different experience. I would imagine someone with a prevalence of disordered eating not in a refugee situation, and in a refugee situation it's a very different thing most probably. So I think it's going to be about making sure that we are consulting the right people, building that session sort of in a way that's going to really support them. And I think what's nice is that's when we'll really, really focus on sort of your practice, Molly. And I think we said that we would do like a 1 hour yoga session at that point. Because how is yoga good for this topic?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're experiencing high stress or even trauma, we oftentimes disconnect from our bodies. And so that can disconnect us from our body sensations like hunger, fullness, thirst. So these embodied tools such as yoga and mindfulness can help us to reconnect that to reconnect with those sensations, and also just to come back to a place of safety in the body, really helping us to befriend our bodies. And I do speak from my own experiences of having an eating disorder and healing through yoga. But as Candace mentioned, of course, this is different within each community and each demographic. And so with the refugee community, there's obviously things like food insecurity, lack of choice around food. So yeah, we definitely aim to be sensitive. And I appreciate the Epic Assist approach of really bringing in consultants and specialists for each step of the process. So on the YMP team, we have one of our team members works in eating disorder clinics. So she'll be one of the people that we reach out to for guidance around this. So yeah, I hope that answers your question there, Candace.
Definitely. And then also we've got most of our mental health awareness materials are designed and have been already delivered with Grant Thompson, who is our psychologist based in Australia. So yeah, just to reiterate, even though we are sort of practitioners and we have knowledge around a lot of these topics, we always just bring in people who are specialists and can make sure that we're on the right track. And also community members as well. We'll talk about that more, but I love that we've also managed to gather a really fantastic group of individuals who have experienced being a refugee but are now professionals working with refugees, because for me they really can see it from all angles. So we'll talk about that more. But yeah, so just to say, the fourth session now is art design and community empowerment. So again, it's, you can see how we're sort of shifting between different types of topics, and I am excited for this one. I really am. So I am doing this practice as part of my PhD, and essentially it's a mapping practice where you work with the community to map out their sense of being, who they see themselves to be, what their values are, what cultural norms they identify within their own experience, and how this plays out in physical spaces around them. So I have been inspired by, and I'm taught by Mitch Miller, who created something called the dialectogram, which is a deep map that involves communities coming together, and it's really about the process of mapping as much as the finished product. And what we'll do is we sit together, we story tell, we share experiences, and we can even bring in physical objects into the room to that are identity markers. So you might want to, my idea was to do like a potluck where communities bring food from their culture and we can exchange in that. And essentially after it, you have an A0 map that promotes connectivity in the moment. People feel connected and they belong to each other. And it's also like a visual aid that they can use with staff member ongoing. They can say, we are happy that you want to deliver this service with us, but we want you to make sure you include who we are. And this is a good way. It's a tool for them to use to make sure that people know who they are when they're designing for them. So it'll be a really great workshop where, yeah, it's just about immersive art. For anyone who's even not that bothered but just loves art, it'll just be a really fun time to, because I think art is so therapeutic and so healing that even for anyone who's not as interested in mapping, they'll get to engage in other types of art, which will be really nice. Photography, we're going to actually buy and donate some art supplies, so we'll use it in that session, then we'll leave it in the centre and people can use it after we've already gone. So that's really nice as well. And then communication and cultural awareness. Again, this is sort of taking projects that Epic has already run and flipping it on its head. So we have gone into schools, we have gone into community centres and worked with young children to get them thinking about the refugee experience. And in Scotland, we call them New Scots. People who come to the country are New Scots, and just encouraging children to sort of see the positivity and the great things that come with having people move here, and also to get them a wee bit more empathetic about the experience that people have gone through to get here. One of the things that we had in that was an excellent refugee practitioner who's one of our consultants, Maddie Saki. He would come in and he'd talk about his experience and how he had entered from Iran into the UK. So yeah, just a really brilliant workshop. And what we decided was there was one part of that workshop that was really good, and essentially it was where we pointed out, or we talked about cultural differences, but we pointed out the odd things or the silly things that British people do. And we made it all about sort of that British thing of, well, why would we, like, for some reason in Scotland, people can't stand up without going, right, to leave a conversation. They go, right. And it's like, well, why do we do that? It's such a weird cultural thing. And we, as I think British people, can be overly polite, like almost, again, very silly. Like one of the things on the list was like not eating a packet of crisps on a train because they might smell, like things like that are very much part of our culture. And I think when people come and they're trying to integrate into a new place, these are the kind of things that you kind of scratch your head at and you take a minute, because you can really misinterpret what the other person means in a situation based on sort of body language, and sort of not having the cultural awareness, or not having that awareness that there are cultural differences. Because I think if we all went into situations where we just understood that somebody might not mean what you think they mean, and you took that minute or had that pause where you really got to know them for who they are and what they're explaining through their actions. So it's a very much, again, about the body and about communication. It's not just verbal communication. And one of the things that we have that's really great here is a 90-minute drama, breathing, and boxing workshop. And this is a really fantastic session that was designed and is delivered by Sheldon Chadwick, who is the founder of the Showman's Mental Health Awareness Charity, but he has had a career working in the prison system with prisoners not used to expressing themselves in a way that's going to be good for their own well-being. And I think one of the things was having the sort of drama element where you're having people sort of practice and play out different scenarios to get people thinking about how they enter a space and the body language they have as they enter it, mixed with sort of breathing to sort of self-regulate, calm down, don't get too upset or too emotional or worried in a situation, or at least be in control of that, because we all have emotions, we all feel what we feel. And then also the boxing element, because boxing is just a really sort of fantastic way to let your aggression out in a safe environment, or in a safe way to really, we all hold on to things. And I think that for some people, and I think most people, if they give it a go, that there are soft practices to sort of alleviate, but for others there's something about sort of being able to sort of physically get out their aggressions, and in that way that they really like, maybe aggression's the wrong word, but their emotions and their experiences.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Candace. I think that really highlights again that this embodiment isn't just yoga. So I know we're titled Yoga Mandala Project, but it doesn't really encompass the full spectrum. So boxing is another one of those embodiment tools that people can use to release the stored emotions and stored experiences, that we're really excited to be able to weave in. And with this one, with the Yazidis in particular, I think we're really looking forward to just creating a space where they feel safe and welcome and celebrated in their own culture. So really allowing them to bring in things like their dancing. They have beautiful dancing that they come together and everyone knows. So really just opening the space for them to shine and bring themselves into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're very much about adapting on our toes. Like, we're not going to force a direction that people might not necessarily want to go down. And if, for instance, they're really engaged and really enjoying the drama part of it, we might say, right, let's maybe do an opportunity to perform any devised performances. Or if they're really engaged with the boxing, we'll sort of lean more into that. Really just reading what the community, or what they want, and what they're going to get from it. Because there's no point in you or I or anybody saying it's really good for you to do X, Y, and Z, and then somebody just doesn't want to do it, because it only works if people work it, I think. We're laughing, we say we've had that many different experiences where things can sometimes just go in a whole different direction, that you just learn eventually to adapt. And I think that comes with the experience of doing this type of work.
Yeah, it's we've kind of touched on the co-creation element a little bit, and that's, a shared passion of both Epic Assist and YMP. And like Candace has mentioned, it's about taking, well, maybe she hasn't mentioned this part, but it's about taking care of yourself to do what Candace is mentioning, of being able to adapt and show up in the space and read the room. And when we're working with these kind of communities and refugee camps, we might not know what they're experiencing. One day they might come in energized and happy and chatty, and then that night maybe there's news from their village at home, or maybe there's some different news on their resettlement, and they come in the next day needing something completely different. So that's really what we aim to do, is to really be able to adapt to the needs in front of us.
So yeah, and then we also have the gender equality and relationships and consent, which actually is a really, really important one. And it's one that I've been doing a lot of work with a charity in the UK called You Before Two, designing materials for that. And it's very much about sort of, there'll be elements of discussion of maybe gender-based violence and the law and why consent's important in that sense, but actually there'll be also, and again we'll work with parents and we'll work with community centre and communities to make sure that we're doing it in the right way. But there'll also, yeah, just be a softer element or side to it where it's more about sort of relationships in general, relationships you can have with family, friends, and just how to sort of bring in the good communication, bring in the body positivity and apply it to your relationships with people. Think about things like other people's mental health around you. So it's going to be in relationships more broadly. And yeah, and consent and just breaking down what consent means. And you think as adults that consents are very explanatory, like it just makes it, we know what consent means, but actually you'll be surprised when you're working with young people, teenagers, that the sort of dynamics around consent, it can be quite confusing. Like they don't always necessarily know what it means. And like one of the things that I've seen young people get confused by is if someone is drunk or if someone initially says yes but then they say no. Like the fine points and details around consent is something that you do need to discuss. It does need to be a discussion, and we'll just make sure we work with communities for that. So just to say, got some fantastic practitioners and consultants on board who are helping us build and make sure the materials and everything's where it should be. We have an ESOL teacher who is making sure that all the materials are the appropriate sort of language level. And it's just going to be a fantastic project. But I'll let Molly say a little bit about self-care and carers for the carers workshop.
Yeah.
And then I think we could leave it there because it's been amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about this one, as I've shared kind of my passion for caring for the aid workers and humanitarians. So we aim to offer a free workshop for each organization that we host this youth program with, in a way that empowers their current team in the field, but also ideally in a way that equips their leadership to continue caring for the carers. So we aim to go in and provide an introduction to self-care. We have some frameworks that we use for self-care around the window of tolerance in the nervous system and self-regulation, setting non-negotiables, creating a self-care action plan. So really opening up a space where each team can come together and share how they're doing and what their needs are. So exploring how we can be well as individuals and how we can be well as a community of aid workers through, similar to the youth programs, through not just theory, but reflective discussion and interactive learning and embodiment. So that's definitely an exciting element of the overall project that YMP is kind of bringing in.
I just want to say thank you, Molly, so much for coming and speaking to us. And hopefully we've given everybody a bit more of an insight into what we do and our partnership and the things we've done as individuals. What we'd really love to do is put YMP's sort of social media info in the description of the video, and hopefully like I really encourage people to take a look, and some of the photos and videos and things you have from the yoga that you've done is just absolutely, they're just beautiful in themselves to watch and to see.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we're really excited to make this project happen in whatever way it unfolds. And we invite you, if you're an aid worker or someone caring for others in any way, or a yoga teacher, to check out our page, and there are trainings. We offer trauma-informed trainings year-round, self-paced and live, and those trainings go towards funding all of our programs to last throughout the year. So we also, if you're an aid worker and just could use a little bit of self-care, we offer seasonal embodied sessions. So you're welcome to check out our website for upcoming dates. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you. And thanks again for anyone who has watched. We're hoping to do these videos at least monthly, and we'll have amazing people like Molly, practitioners and people that we work with come and share what they know with all of you. So please take care. Again, follow both of our social medias. You'll see lots more content from us. And yeah, hopefully you'll see another video from us very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.